Okay, so we will be discussing atoms, molecules, and mole concept. Atoms, molecules, and mole concept. So we know mole concept is a very important concept in chemistry, right? And there are a number of things that we discuss in mole concept. There are a number of important basic things that are related to mole concept. Almost, I think, whole chemistry revolves around the mole concept, right? But before we discuss mole concept, we need to understand some important terms related to atoms and molecules. We know that matter is made up of small particles, which are extremely small particles, and proposed by Dalton in year 1808, matter is composed of atoms. So what are atoms? Atoms are the fundamental particles of matter, or we say atoms are the building blocks of matter, right? But what about these atoms? Do they exist independently, or are they not capable of independent existence? Or is it like that some atoms are capable of independent existence and some atoms are not? Some exist as independent atoms and some exist as groups of atoms, right? These things we'll try to understand in our today's topic, atoms, molecules, and mole concept. And we will be discussing these things in different parts of this lecture series. Okay, so first of all, we'll try to understand what's an atom. By definition, we say atom, it is the smallest particle of matter which may or may not be capable of independent existence. All right. This is the basic definition of atom. So when we define atom, we say atom is the smallest particle of matter which may or may not be capable of independent existence. Then the question is, how do atoms exist? Now, there are two things in this definition, two parts rather. Smallest particle of matter is the atom, but it may or it may not be. It may or it may not be. So, it is the smallest particle of matter, no doubt, but it may or may not be capable of independent existence. So, there is no doubt about this fact that whole matter, चाहे वो किसी भी फॉर्म में है, सॉलिड फॉर्म में है, लिक्विड फॉर्म में है, गैस फॉर्म में है, प्योर स्टेट में है, केमिकली इम्प्योर स्टेट में है, मिक्सचर्स है, राइट, एलिमेंट्स है, कंपाउंड्स है, राइट, एटम जो है ये एग्जिस्ट करता है कुछ सिचुएशंस में, कुछ एलिमेंट्स में independently, but in number of cases it does not exist independently. All right, for example, when we talk of atoms, we have hydrogen atoms, right? We have, say for example, oxygen atoms, right? We have, say for example, nitrogen atoms, right? As many as elements are there, as many as atoms are there, right? जितने हमारे पास atoms है, उतने हमारे पास elements है, because elements are made up of atoms. Now, we will try to understand how these atoms exist and what this basic definition of atom mean. All right? Now, एटम जो है कुछ केसेस में, that means there are a number of atoms which are capable of independent existence. All right? Say for example, we can have atoms of helium, neon, argon, krypton, xenon, radon. ये जो हमारे पास एलिमेंट्स है जिनको हम नोबल गैसेस कहते हैं, ठीक है, these are known as noble gases. In these noble gases, their atoms are capable of independent existence. So I say helium atom is capable of independent existence, right? So helium जो है इसके atoms independently exist करते हैं. So we can have atoms of helium. We have atoms of helium, right? Individual atoms of helium. हमारे पास independent, individual helium atoms होते हैं because helium के atoms जो है वो stable है under normal conditions of temperature and pressure, under natural conditions जिसको हम कहते हैं, right? इसी तरह से नियॉन की बात करेंगे आप, ऑर्गन की बात करेंगे आप, क्रिप्टॉन की, जीनॉन की, रेडॉन की बात करेंगे आप. ये जो हमारे पास एलिमेंट्स हैं, ठीक है, जिन एटम्स के ये बने हैं नेचुरली, हीलियम इज मेड अप ऑफ हीलियम एटम्स, नियॉन इज मेड अप ऑफ नियॉन एटम्स, आर्गन मेड अप ऑफ आर्गन एटम्स. ये एलिमेंट्स जो है इनके एटम्स जो है वो स्टेबल है, राइट? इनको किसी दूसरे के साथ मिलने की जरूरत नहीं है, केमिकली रिएक्ट करने की जरूरत नहीं है ताकि ये स्टेबल हो जाए. नो, दे आर स्टेबल बाय देमसेल्व्स. नेचर में ये स्टेबल है, ठीक है. तो ये एटम्स जो है ये स्टेबल है. तो पहला पार्ट जो डेफिनेशन का है एटम का वो हमारा यहां पे एक्सप्रेस हो रहा है, ठीक है, एक्सप्लेन हो रहा है रादर, दैट एटम इज द स्मॉलेस्ट पार्टिकल व्हिच मे be capable of independent existence. So there are atoms which are independently existent. आपके पास अलग हीलियम एटम हो सकते हैं, हीलियम एटम्स, सेपरेट हीलियम एटम्स, राइट? हमारे पास सेपरेट नियॉन एटम्स हो सकते हैं, राइट? हमारे पास सेपरेट आर्गन एटम्स हो सकते हैं और होते हैं. Since all these elements are gases, so definitely they exist as atomic gases. Now, in case of these elements, because elements are made up of atoms, we know by definition what we say, what an element is. Element, when we define, we say pure substance made up of only one kind of atoms. Elements are the pure substances. Pure in chemistry we say substances which are made up of only one kind of particles. Okay? So in case of elements, the particles are atoms, definitely, right? Now, element is a pure substance which is made up of only one kind of atoms. So what we have as hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, say for example boron, carbon, etc., these all are elements because they are made up of only one kind of atoms, right? Say for example hydrogen is made up of hydrogen atoms, helium is made up of helium atoms, lithium is made up of lithium atoms, beryllium is made up of beryllium atoms, so on and so forth. Now when we say element, we say pure substance made up of only one kind of atoms. But in case of elements, is it like that atoms of every element are capable of independent existence or not? The answer is no. Because in case of these elements, their atoms are stable as such. हीलियम के एटम्स स्टेबल है, नियॉन के एटम्स खुद से स्टेबल है, आर्गन के एटम्स खुद से स्टेबल है, क्रिप्टन के एटम्स खुद से स्टेबल है. सो वी हैव स्टेबल एटम्स एज helium atoms, as neon atoms, as argon atoms. But in case of these elements, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, fluorine, chlorine, bromine, iodine, phosphorus, sulfur, for example, we do not have their separate atoms as stable species, as stable atoms, right? In case of elements like hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, okay, we have, say for example, bromine, we have, say for example, chlorine. Atoms of these elements, they are not stable. Singly they are not stable. Isolated atoms इनके stable नहीं है. जब हम nature में देखते हैं हाइड्रोजन को, तो हाइड्रोजन जो है does not exist as hydrogen atom. This is non-existent under natural conditions. But hydrogen exists as, but hydrogen जो है ये exist करता है कैसे? How does it exist in nature? Hydrogen exists in nature as H2 species. It's a group of two hydrogen atoms. Oxygen, it does not exist in nature under natural conditions, under normal conditions of temperature and pressure. It does not exist as separate oxygen atom, but it exists as oxygen molecule, जिसको हम dioxygen कहते हैं, right? Nitrogen, likewise, it exists as N2. Bromine, it exists as Br2. Likewise, chlorine, it exists as Cl2. Likewise, phosphorus exists as P4. Sulfur, it exists as S8. Okay? So, the definition of atom, it is the smallest particle of matter which may or may not be capable of independent existence is deciphered here. Right? इन एलिमेंट्स के केस में इनके एटम्स जो है इंडिविजुअल इंडिपेंडेंट एटम्स जो है दे आर स्टेबल आइसोलेटेड एटम्स आर स्टेबल सो दिस पार्ट ऑफ डेफिनेशन दैट matter is made up of small particles which are called as atoms. They may be capable of independent existence. This part is clear here. But some atoms, they are not capable of independent existence. It's here. Atoms of these elements, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, bromine, chlorine, इनके atoms जो है वो independently exist नहीं करते हैं under natural conditions. Okay, so we have hydrogen molecule, we have oxygen molecule, nitrogen molecule, bromine molecule, chlorine molecule, iodine molecule, etc. All right. So when we say that atom is smallest particle of matter which may or may not be capable of independent existence, they say that some of the elements, they exist in atomic form and some of the elements, they exist in molecular form. So here comes the definition of the molecule. Okay, so we'll try to understand how do atoms exist. How do atoms exist? All right. So this is a question now. How do atoms exist? Okay. Now, first, some atoms. Now I will write elements because elements are made up of atoms. Okay, it's a pure substance made up of atoms. So bulk of atom, when we say it's element, right? So some atoms are capable of independent existence. Independent existence, right? Examples we have noble gases. Examples we have helium, we have neon, we have argon, we have krypton, we have xenon, we have radon, for example. Right? some atoms do not exist independently. Means their atoms, those atoms, elements of those atoms of those elements or those atoms, they are not capable of independent existence. It means they exist in groups of atoms, wherein atoms have combined chemically. Examples we have: hydrogen exists as H2, oxygen exists as O2, nitrogen exists as N2, chlorine exists as Cl2, bromine exists as Br2, etc. That's why whenever you have a chemical reaction, when you write its equation, okay, when you report a chemical reaction, you always take these substances as dihydrogens, hydrogen molecule, oxygen molecule, nitrogen molecule, chlorine molecule, bromine molecule, etc. Okay, so atoms, how do they exist? Atoms may exist independently and atoms may exist in groups. Okay, now there are two situations, there are two possibilities. Either same atoms, that is similar kinds of atoms, same atoms may combine to give stable species as group of atoms जिनको हम molecules कहते हैं, and different atoms, that means different kinds of atoms may combine to give group of atoms which is stable. Again, this will be also called as molecules, right? So atoms, no doubt, they are the building blocks of matter, but some atoms are capable of independent existence and some atoms are not capable of independent existence. Okay, now we will try to understand what may be the constituent particles of different substances. Okay, what may be the constituent particles of different substances, because we are going to discuss mole concept. These are the preliminary things that we must know, okay, or we need to revise. Maybe in other classes we have discussed all these things, but we need to revise a little. All right, now when we say chemical substances, when we say substances, broadly speaking, we divide the chemical substances, we categorize the chemical substances into two groups. All right, one we say pure substances, and second we say mixtures. All right, this is what we study under the term chemical classification of matter, right? Now, pure substances, we have elements and compounds. And when we talk of mixtures, these are impure substances chemically. We have different types of mixtures. Broadly speaking, we have homogeneous mixtures, we have heterogeneous mixtures. Okay. We won't be discussing this part because this is simply mixture. What is mixture? When two or more than two pure substances are mixed in any proportion, okay, without reacting chemically, they form mixture, right? But in this topic, we're discussing atoms, molecules, and mole concept. We'll be dealing with this part because this is important part. This is a fragment of this topic, right? So we'll just, for the time being, we will not discuss mixtures. We'll discuss elements and compounds because this will give us an idea how elements exist in nature. So, when we say pure substances, we have elements and compounds. First, we'll say what are elements, right? We say by definition, these are the pure substances. These are the pure substances which are made up of only one kind of atoms. Pure substance in chemistry simply means a substance which is made up of only one kind of constituent particles. वो कोई भी substance जिसके constituent particles एक ही जैसे हो, that's a pure substance. Okay, now when we give the definition of elements, right, we say these are the pure substances which are made up of only one kind of atoms. Say for example, I talk about helium. Helium is made up of helium atoms. So what are the constituent particles? Helium atoms. So neon is made up of neon atoms, right? So what are the particles here? Neon atoms. Now I say argon, for example. So what are the particles of which argon element is made up of? It's simply argon atoms. Okay, so these are the atoms, these are the substances which are made up of only one kind of atoms. So these are pure substances because their constituent particles are only of one kind, helium atoms, then neon atoms, then argon atoms, right? These are the pure substances. But we have oxygen as O2, we have nitrogen as N2, we have bromine as Br2, we have iodine as I2. Now, in case of these substances, that is dioxygen or dinitrogen or bromine or iodine, for example, what are the constituent particles? Constituent particles are oxygen molecules because these are stable. As earlier I told you that oxygen जो है ये nature में independently exist नहीं करता है. Oxygen atom जो है ये nature में stable नहीं है, right? तो oxygen क्या करता है? ये दूसरे oxygen atom के साथ मिलके एक oxygen molecules का group बनाता है, दो oxygen atoms का group बनाता है, ठीक है? तो एक oxygen molecule बनता है. तो अगर हम इसको रिप्रेजेंट करेंगे इन अ वेरी सिंपल मैनर, तो हम इसको ऐसे रिप्रेजेंट करेंगे, ये डबल बॉन्ड बनाता है O2, ठीक है, एक मॉलिक्यूल है, फिर एक दूसरा ऑक्सीजन मॉलिक्यूल होगा, फिर एक और ऑक्सीजन मॉलिक्यूल होगा. सो व्हेन वी टॉक ऑफ ऑक्सीजन, वी से ऑक्सीजन जो है ये एग्जिस्ट करता है एज मॉलिक्यूलर ऑक्सीजन, ठीक है। सो इन केस ऑफ ऑक्सीजन एज एन एलिमेंट, द कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट स्टेबल कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट पार्टिकल्स जो है वो है ऑक्सीजन मॉलिक्यूल्स, नॉट ऑक्सीजन एटम्स, ठीक है। अब डेफिनेशन जो हमने एलिमेंट की दी है वो है प्योर सब्सटेंस मेड अप ऑफ ओनली वन काइंड ऑफ एटम्स, नो डाउट। ऑक्सीजन इज मेड अप ऑफ ओनली ऑक्सीजन एटम्स, नाइट्रोजन इज मेड अप ऑफ ओनली नाइट्रोजन एटम्स, bromine is made up of bromine atoms, iodine is made up of iodine atoms, although their state of existence is molecular, but still oxygen molecule is made up of oxygen atoms, nitrogen molecule is made up of nitrogen atoms, bromine molecule is made up of bromine atoms, iodine molecule is made up of iodine atoms. And now, since these are the groups of atoms, all these species we say these are molecules, but we say these are molecules of elements. These are molecules of elements, और हम इन्हें कहते हैं elemental molecules. और एक एडिशनल टर्म आपको सीखनी है कि एक एलिमेंट के मॉलिक्यूल में जितने एटम्स प्रेजेंट है, ठीक है, एक टर्म हम यहां से डिराइव करेंगे, एटॉमिसिटी। व्हाट्स एटॉमिसिटी? वी से द नंबर ऑफ एटम्स प्रेजेंट in a molecule of element. Okay, so if we talk about oxygen, how many atoms of oxygen are present in oxygen molecule? It's 2. So what is atomicity of oxygen? It's 2. Atomicity of oxygen is 2. What's atomicity of nitrogen? It's again 2. What's atomicity of bromine? It's again 2. What's atomicity of iodine? It's again 2. And if we have, say for example, let me write it here, P4 atomicity of phosphorus is 4. We have S8 atomicity of sulfur is 8. Alright? So, molecules of elements. These are the molecules which are made up of same kind, only one type of atoms. Okay? So, these are also called as homonuclear molecules. These are also called as homonuclear molecules. Okay? Now, we're talking about helium, neon, argon. We're talking about oxygen, nitrogen, bromine, iodine. These are all non-metals, right? So, we know that elements, we have 3 types of elements, right? Pure substances made up of only one kind of atoms. We have 3 types of elements. We say metals that we study in earlier classes, in lower classes. We have non-metals. Okay, we have metal voids. So, most of the non-metals like oxygen, nitrogen, bromine, iodine, they exist in the molecular form, right? Some of the non-metals like noble gases, they exist in the atomic form. Okay, so what about the metals and metalloids? They exist in the bulk, as we say for example, we have iron strip, we have copper strip, for example, right? We have zinc strip, we have gold strip, for example. They exist in bulk. But there's no doubt about that. Those elements, they can be also turned into atomic form, and their atoms are also stable. Right? We can have a gaseous state of a metal, right? The atoms of that metal, they definitely will be stable, and we can have atomic form of the metals. Okay? So, atoms, they exist in groups as molecules of elements, or they exist as independent atoms, right? As in case of noble gases. And the third category that we are going to discuss is when different elements combine, when different types of atoms combine chemically, what they form? They form compounds. Okay, so the second type of pure substance that we have are the compounds. Okay, now atoms, the state of existence is some atoms are independently existent, some atoms are not independently existent, they exist in the form of molecules, in the form of groups, right? But they exist in the form of groups made up of same types of atoms. Now, there is one more category where we say atoms of different elements, they combine and they form compounds, right? Now, we have two types of compounds that we will discuss after this, right? So we have compounds, the second pure class of substances, compounds. We will discuss that, compounds. Okay, after that we will just conclude the existence of atoms. So we have compounds now, right? When we say compounds, what are compounds? Again, compounds are again, these are the pure substances. These are the pure substances. Pure substances हैं, ठीक है? These are the pure substances which are made up of different types of atoms, combined chemically. This is the important thing, combined chemically in different proportion, indefinite, not different. Different is also right, but the appropriate word is indefinite proportion. Indefinite proportion by mass. I will come to this part later, definite proportion by mass. What do we mean by that? Simple terms में मैं आपको ये बताऊं कि कंपाउंड क्या है, ये प्योर सब्सटेंस है, फिर से प्योर सब्सटेंस है, means this substance is again made up of only one kind of particles. Alright? Only one kind of particles, and those particles are made up of different types of atoms. That is, compound is basically made up of group of atoms. Okay, compound is made up of group of atoms, but those atoms are different and they have combined chemically. Alright, they have combined chemically. Chemical reaction हुई है और एक compound जो है वो existence में आया है. Okay, now what is the difference between the molecule of the compound? Because हम यहाँ पे कह रहे हैं these are the pure substances which are made up of different types of atoms combined chemically, right? When they have combined chemically, that definitely have to be a group of atoms, right? When it is group of atoms, it definitely is a molecule. Now, what is the difference between the molecule of an element, molecule of a compound, right? So we say for example, we have water as a compound. Water as compound. It's made up of hydrogen and oxygen. We have simple compound glucose, say for example. It's made up of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. We have hydrochloric acid, HCl. It's made up of hydrogen and chlorine, right? And here we see in water we have two hydrogen atoms combined with oxygen. In say for example glucose, we have carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. 6 carbon atoms, 12 hydrogen atoms and 6 oxygen atoms have combined chemically to form the constituent particle of glucose. Alright, so this is the molecule of water, this is the molecule of glucose, because this is group of atoms. How many atoms? 3. 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. So 3 atoms, it's a group of atoms. So here we have, it's 12 plus 6 plus 6, so it is 24 atoms. Okay, they have combined, so it's again a molecule. Now, since the molecules of the compounds are made up of different kinds of atoms, so these are called as heteronuclear molecules. Okay, so when atoms combine to form compounds, there are two basic ways of forming compounds. There are two methods by which atoms combine to form compounds. When two same atoms combine and they form a molecule, it's again a chemical reaction. They have reacted chemically, they react chemically. And when two or more than two different atoms combine chemically to form a molecule, it's again a chemical change, a chemical reaction, and a new constituent particle, it comes into existence, right? So what is the difference between the molecule of an element and molecule of a compound? Okay, a lot of students have this confusion that elements, they do not exist in molecules. नहीं, ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. There are molecules of elements and there are molecules of compounds. The difference is molecules of elements जो है वो same atoms के बने हैं and molecules of compounds जो है वो different atoms के बने हुए हैं. Alright? Now, when we talk of compounds, what happens in compounds? Atoms combine, they combine chemically, okay? Atoms lose their identity and they form new substances. New chemical substances, okay, which are different than their constituent atoms. Just a simple example. Say for example, we have glucose. It is C6H12O6. What are the constituent atoms? Atoms क्या क्या है इसमें? कार्बन है, हाइड्रोजन है, ऑक्सीजन है. Alright? ग्लूकोज जो है, ना तो ये कार्बन है, ना ये ऑक्सीजन है, ना ये हाइड्रोजन है. It's a different substance. Oxygen, we inhale it as O2 from the air atmosphere. Hydrogen, as such, हम इसको यूज नहीं करते हैं, ठीक है? फ्यूल्स में या नेचर में बहुत यूज होता है, ठीक है? हमारे बॉडी कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट्स का एक हिस्सा है ये, बट एज सच हमारे लिए हाइड्रोजन की नॉर्मल लाइफ में एज सच मतलब खाने पीने में कोई इसका यूसेज नहीं है, राइट? लाइकवाइज प्योर कार्बन वी कांट टेक इट, ठीक है? प्योर कार्बन हम नहीं खा सकते हैं. हाइड्रोजन एज सच किसी काम का नहीं है, ठीक है? ऑक्सीजन ये हम इनहेल करते हैं, ठीक है? लेकिन यही कार्बन जिसको हम नहीं खा सकते हैं, नहीं खाते हैं, राइट? जब यही कार्बन इस फॉर्म में आता है, ग्लूकोज के फॉर्म में, तो हम ग्लूकोज को कंज्यूम करते हैं, ठीक है? तो कहने का मतलब ये है, कार्बन एज कार्बन एक डिफरेंट एंटिटी है, हाइड्रोजन एज हाइड्रोजन एक डिफरेंट एंटिटी है, ऑक्सीजन एज ऑक्सीजन डिफरेंट एंटिटी है, बट जब ये मिलते हैं एक दूसरे के साथ केमिकली, तो एक नई सब्सटेंस, एक नई चीज जो है वो वजूद में आती है. व्हाट वी से, अ न्यू सब्सटेंस कम्स इनटू एग्जिस्टेंस. दैट्स व्हाई वी से in case of compounds, since compound is made up of different elements, what actually happens? Atoms lose their identity, ठीक है? And a new substance comes into existence. अब जब elements मिलते हैं, what are the modes of chemical combination? ठीक है? We are trying to understand what are the constituent particles of substance. So far we have discussed two things. One is the atoms, another is the molecule. Now third thing that we have to understand is the ion. Okay? So compounds two types mostly on the basis of the mode of their formation. ठीक है? So how do atoms combine? One is by transfer of electrons. Second is by sharing of electrons. Alright? इन कंपाउंड्स को जो ट्रांसफर इलेक्ट्रॉन से बनते हैं we say electrovalent compounds, जिनको हम कहते हैं आयनिक कंपाउंड्स भी. और बाय शेयरिंग ऑफ इलेक्ट्रॉन्स, जब इलेक्ट्रॉन्स शेयर होते हैं वो कंपाउंड्स जो बनते हैं उनको हम क्या कहते हैं? उनको हम कहते हैं कोवेलेंट कंपाउंड्स. कोवेलेंट कंपाउंड्स और मॉलिक्यूलर कंपाउंड्स भी. ठीक है? कोवेलेंट कंपाउंड्स भी, मॉलिक्यूलर कंपाउंड्स भी. राइट? सो व्हाट्स द डिफरेंस बिटवीन कोवेलेंट कंपाउंड्स and what's the difference between electrovalent compounds and covalent compounds? Just in a jiffy we will try to understand that, because these things we have already studied in our lower classes. Just for the sake of revision, just to understand what are the different fundamental particles, what are the stable particles in different kinds of substance. For that reason, for that sake, we'll just give a little revision to this thing. Okay? Now, when atoms react by transfer of electrons, what type of compounds are formed? Electrovalent compounds, और जिन्हें आप कहते हैं आयनिक compounds भी. Right? Say for example, सोडियम हमें पता है इसकी वैलेंसी 1 है, ये हमेशा इलेक्ट्रॉन लूज करता है. क्यों? क्योंकि ये मेटल है, और मेटल का नेचर क्या होता है? इलेक्ट्रोपॉजिटिव. इलेक्ट्रोपॉजिटिव का मतलब टेंडेंसी टू लूज इलेक्ट्रॉन्स. राइट? तो सोडियम जो है ये हमेशा एक इलेक्ट्रॉन लूज करता है और स्टेबल हो जाता है in order to attain the nearest open gas configuration. राइट? तो सोडियम की वैलेंसी 1 है, ये एक इलेक्ट्रॉन लूज करता है. ओके? तो क्या बन जाता है? एक स्पीशीज. कौन सा स्पीशीज? जिसपे पॉजिटिव चार्ज है. ओके? दिस पॉजिटिवली चार्ज्ड species we call as cations. Right? Then क्लोरीन जो है, जब ये रिएक्ट करता है तो एक इलेक्ट्रॉन को गेन करता है in order to attain the nearest noble gas configuration of argon. Right? तो ये नेगेटिवली चार्ज्ड स्पीशीज है. नेट चार्ज आ जाता है जो हम पढ़ते हैं लोअर क्लासेस में, हाउ डज नेट चार्ज डेवलप्स. ठीक है? नेगेटिवली चार्ज्ड स्पीशीज है. ठीक है? तो इसको क्या कहते हैं? एनाइन कहते हैं. तो पॉजिटिवली चार्ज्ड या नेगेटिवली चार्ज्ड स्पीशीज जो है इनको हम कहते हैं आइंस. ठीक है? तो आइंस आर बेसिकली चार्ज्ड स्पीशीज. अब पॉजिटिवली चार्ज्ड है तो कैटाइन, नेगेटिवली चार्ज्ड है तो एनाइन. ओके? नाउ इस स्पीशीज ने इलेक्ट्रॉन लूज किया, इस स्पीशीज ने इलेक्ट्रॉन गेन किया. क्यों? नॉन मेटल है, और नॉन मेटल क्या होता है? इलेक्ट्रोनेगेटिव. और इलेक्ट्रोनेगेटिव का मतलब टेंडेंसी होती है इसको इलेक्ट्रॉन गेन करने की. ठीक है? अब जब सोडियम ने इलेक्ट्रॉन लूज किया, क्लोरीन ने वो इलेक्ट्रॉन गेन किया, तो ये पॉजिटिव आयन बना, ये नेगेटिव आयन बना. चार्ज्ड स्पीशीज है, और ये चार्ज्ड स्पीशीज जो है ये एक दूसरे को बाय इलेक्ट्रोस्टैटिक फोर्स अट्रैक्ट करते हैं, और इनके बीच में बॉन्ड बनता है जिसको हम इलेक्ट्रोवैलेंट बॉन्ड कहते हैं. और ये स्पीशीज जो है जो आयंस का बना है, सोडियम पॉजिटिव एंड क्लोराइड नेगेटिव आयंस का बना है, इसलिए हम इसको कहते हैं आयनिक कंपाउंड। आपको पता है आयंस जो है, आयन इज नेवर स्टेबल, आयन इज नेवर स्टेबल, आयन इज नेवर स्टेबल। तो हमेशा एक पॉजिटिव चार्ज्ड आयन के साथ, स्पीशीज के साथ एक नेगेटिवली चार्ज्ड आयन वहां पे होगा, एंड total positive charge will be always equal to total negative charge, and as a whole the compound ionic compound, it will be neutral. All right, हमारे पास examples जो है they are in hundreds, thousands rather. Say for example we have NaCl, say for example we have MgCl2, say for example we have calcium carbonate, ठीक है, सोडियम क्लोराइड, मैग्नीशियम क्लोराइड, कैल्शियम कार्बोनेट, आयरन सल्फेट आपके पास है, कॉपर सल्फेट आपके पास है। These are all ionic compounds. These are all ionic compounds. तो ये एक तरीका है, this is one way to form the stable species. This is one way to form the compounds. और ये compounds कैसे बनते हैं? By transfer of electrons, और इनको हम कहते हैं ionic compounds. Right? Now, सेकेंड टाइप ऑफ कंपाउंड्स जो है, जो बनते हैं कैसे? बाय शेयरिंग ऑफ इलेक्ट्रॉन्स, ठीक है। उनकी कुछ एग्जांपल्स हम देखेंगे, ठीक है। वी हैव सी फॉर एग्जांपल वी हैव हाइड्रोजन क्लोराइड, वी हैव HCl जिसे हम कहते हैं, राइट, इज एन एसिड, ओके, ठीक है। ये हाइड्रोजन क्लोराइड क्या है? हाइड्रोजन और क्लोरीन जो इस केस में है वो इलेक्ट्रॉन्स को शेयर करते हैं, बिकॉज दोनों नॉन मेटल्स हैं, ठीक है। तो दोनों इलेक्ट्रोनेगेटिव है, ऑल्दो इलेक्ट्रोनेगेटिव सेम नहीं है, बट न हाइड्रोजन लूज करता है, न क्लोरीन गेन करता है, न क्लोरीन लूज करता है, न हाइड्रोजन गेन करता है। तो फॉर दैट रीजन HCl जो है, इसमें क्या होता है? इसमें हाइड्रोजन और क्लोरीन जो है वो इलेक्ट्रॉन्स को शेयर करते हैं, ठीक है, और आपके पास आ जाता है एक मॉलिक्यूल जिसको आप कहते हैं हाइड्रोजन क्लोराइड। ऑलराइट, सो ये हाइड्रोजन क्लोराइड जो है ये है कोवलेंट मॉलिक्यूल, ठीक है। तो कंपाउंड जो बना HCl, इट इज कोवलेंट कंपाउंड। सेम वे जैसे ऑक्सीजन शेयर करते हैं तो ऑक्सीजन मॉलिक्यूल बनता है, नाइट्रोजन शेयर करते हैं तो नाइट्रोजन मॉलिक्यूल बनता है, राइट। लाइकवाइज डिफरेंट एटम्स HCl, यहाँ पे हाइड्रोजन और क्लोरीन कंबाइन होके HCl बनाते हैं कोवलेंट कंपाउंड। ऑलराइट, कमिंग बैक टू द पॉइंट, हमारे पास जो एटम्स हैं वो कैसे एग्जिस्ट करते हैं, वो कैसे एक दूसरे के साथ रिएक्ट करते हैं, or how many types of constituent particles we have in case of different substances. I will just put it in a sentence. So what are the constituent particles that we will be dealing here in the mole concept? These are we will have atoms as constituent particles. We will have molecules as constituent particles. Then third, we will have ions as constituent particles. So we will be dealing with three types of substances, three types of constituent particles, three types of building blocks, stable constituent particles, stable fundamental particles in different substances, and these will be atoms, these will be molecules, and these will be ions. I hope up to this, whatever we have discussed is understood very well. And now the next part of this lecture series, it will be dealing with mole concept. So what is atom? What is atomic mass? What are the different terms involved? We will be dealing in the successive lectures. Thank you.